back again. So I thought I'd talk about dimensions, specifically the fourth dimension. Now, people will say fourth dimension is time, which is iffy, because there are two types of dimensions. Spatial dimensions, which are dimensions in space, which is the type of dimension we'll talk about, so I'll leave that aside. And temporal dimensions, which are basically time dimensions, which we have one of, which is time. You move forward in it, and you can't move backward in it. Arrow of time problem. That's a physics thing. Anywho, so basically you have one dimension. Though the first dimension is length. So dimension is basically where you have just some dimension has to have a vertice or direction on a right angle to all other dimensions. So yeah, the first dimension is a line. It's just one line. All there is length. No width, no height, no nothing. Then you move into the second dimension, so instead of just length, you have length and width. Up. You just got forward, backward, and left and right. So where just flat 2D things inhabit. Then of course you have what we're familiar with, the third dimension, where you can go up, down, forward, backward, side to side. But then people talk about the fourth dimension. Well, what's the fourth dimension? Well, that's complicated. So to explain the fourth dimension, or explain any dimension really, it helps to go one dimension down and explain it like that. So imagine you have a flat plane, and that's the universe, and Edwin Abbott's Flatland is a very famous novella about, all this stuff. But say you have a flat plane of existence with, flat creatures living there. No up or down, it's just completely flat. And say you entered their world. Well, it's like, imagine a piece of paper that you could, phase your hand through. If you phased your hand through, to that creature, it would look like just sort of a cross-section of your hand. Because it could only see the part of your hand that's directly in the world of the two dimensions that it's occupying. So, say you have really anything, that's going from the third dimension into the second dimension, it'll only just be a cross-section of that object. Same thing with second dimension into the first dimension, it's just that line, of what that object is. So let's say you have a sphere going into the second dimension. It's just going to be a bunch of, say a sphere just goes in the second dimension from above and comes back out to the bottom. It's going to look like a circle, a point, expands into a circle, bigger circle, because as it's going down, the circle is, going towards the sphere, or I should say sphere, actually, because it's a three-dimensional object. So the sphere goes down and goes to the greatest point of, where it is, and then it will start to shrink from the 2D creature's point of view into a point, because then it's going smaller and smaller and smaller, because it's a sphere, and it's just a bunch of circles laid on top of each other that are get bigger and then smaller. So imagine this for the third dimension. So if a fourth dimensional sphere came into, say, the universe, what would happen is it would look the same, like a sphere that would grow larger and larger and larger, and then smaller and smaller and smaller. So the fourth dimension is simply a dimension that is perpendicular to all our other dimensions, which kind of is hard to wrap your head around, but we know of other objects in the fourth dimension that have names for them. For instance, a cube in the second dimension, a square. Then you go to the third dimension, it's a cube. Go to the fourth dimension, it's called a tesseract. Same thing for a tetrahedron. In the third dimension, in the second dimension, it's a triangle. Third dimension, technically it could be, it is a tetrahedron. And in the fourth dimension, it's called a simplex. And also in all the dimensions above, it's also called a simplex. And Well, that's sort of the fourth dimension. It's basically just another dimension that you cannot point to. That's the thing. If you in a universe, you can't point to a you can't show a dimension above you. You can only show dimensions below you. And I guess you could call a point a zeroth dimension, but that's kind of stupid. Anywho, yeah.